In this video, we'll cover how to use the Akai MPC Renaissance as a plugin within Ableton Live. On the screen in the software, I basically have an empty Ableton project. We're going to open the Ableton preferences and set up the MPC Renaissance audio interface to work as the audio interface for Ableton. So under the Audio tab in the Preferences, under Audio Input Device and under Audio Output Device, choose MPC Renaissance 4 in 4 out. If this doesn't appear in your system, that probably means you haven't installed the drivers either completely or correctly or at all. So grab that first disk that came with your MPC and pop it in your computer. It's called MPC software, and install the drivers off that disk, and that'll make sure that the MPC Renaissance shows up here and here as an audio interface. Next, under the MIDI Sync tab in the Preferences window, we don't need to do anything here yet. MPC does not come with Ableton Mapper as of this time. It shows up here, but you couldn't set it up as a control surface here. But what we're going to do is down here under Input, under MPC Renaissance MPC Public, you're going to turn Remote on. That's going to allow messages from the MPC to be mapped to different controls in Ableton. We're going to use that to set up the transport controls. Before we can do that, we're going to add the MPC plugin to a track in Ableton. So we're going to drag that VST plugin over here into a blank area in Ableton, and it's going to load the plugin. Next thing we're going to do is open up the plugin preferences. They're hidden up here next to the main tab. You click this little icon here with the arrow to access the preferences. Choose Edit Preferences and choose Other, the Other tab, and then under Hardware Transport C, we want to choose DAW here. That's going to allow the transport controls in the MPC to control Ableton as opposed to controlling the transport in here. And for this example, that's what we want to do. So at this point, I'm going to reposition the MPC plugin so I can expand the window. You just grab the bottom corner here, expand it out, and then when we're switching back and forth between tracks during our production process, anytime you choose MPC, you're going to get the plugin to pop up, and then you can hide it by clicking any of the other tracks. If you have two screens, of course, just throw the MPC window onto the other screen, and you can leave it open all the time. Over on the MPC hardware, we're going to push the browser button, and I've got my folder set up, Shift and a folder button, so that folder 4 is where most of my projects are located. So I'm going to load this project here just to get a couple things on. Press the main button. Got a drum loop there. Back in the Ableton software, we're ready to map the transport controls. So you can press the MIDI button here or hit Control M or Apple M if you're on a Mac. And we're going to click on the play button. And over on the hardware, we're going to press the play button. Click the stop button. On the hardware, press the stop button, and do the same for the record button. As you're mapping your transport controls, you also need to set this setting at the bottom to Relative Twos Comp. This setting only appears when you have one of these options selected. Hit Control M or Apple M on your Mac to exit MIDI mapping mode, and we're ready to go. When we made those settings earlier to map the transport controls to Ableton, we chose Edit, Preferences, Other, and we set the hardware transport to DAW at that point. When we do that, that means that we're telling Ableton when we press the record button, we want to record into Ableton, not into the MPC plugin. We're going to record into the MPC plugin now, so we want to set this back to plugin. Typically during the record process, you're going to spend whole phases recording in the plugin and whole phases recording out there in Ableton. When you switch from phase to phase, you might end up changing this setting here in the preferences. Now that we've chosen plugin under hardware transport control, we can record MIDI into the tracks on the plugin. One thing you'll notice is that when you hit record, you're not going to hear that familiar MPC count-in. That's because the plugin takes its count-in settings from your DAW. If you're like me and you don't use a count-in in your DAW, you'll probably leave a blank bar at the beginning of your sequence out in Ableton. The reason this is helpful is if you're recording vocals or artists or any kind of analog instrument, that count-in is more or less useless. It actually fights against you, because as people are counting in, they might have a pickup note right before the one, or they might have a little sound before the one. If you use the count-in function of the DAW, you're not recording during that 1, 2, 3, 4. So that if they have that pickup note, if they have that little sound that ends up being valuable, you've lost it. So the better option, in my opinion, is to have a blank bar at the beginning of your sequence out in your DAW, so that if people do have a pickup note, or if there's anything valuable before the one, you actually capture it. Some of you have also asked how to use the sample record function when you're using the MPC plugin within Ableton Live. As of version 1.0, there is a workaround you have to do in order to do this. We'll cover that now. You can only do this workaround using the VST version of the plugin, which is why we're using it here. It's also confirmed that this has been addressed in the next update for the plugin, and so you won't have to do this workaround moving forward. So with the MPC plugin on a track in Ableton, create another audio track in the software. Under Audio From, choose External In. We're going to choose the two external inputs that are coming from the MPC hardware. So that's going to represent input 1/2. If these don't show up, choose Configure here, click Input Config, and enable that here. Next, set Monitor to In for this track. Under Audio 2, choose MPC. The reason this is an option is because we have a track called 3MPC here in our project. So we're going to take audio from an external in, which is the MPC hardware. We're going to route it right out to another track, which has the MPC plugin running on it. With this short workaround, we can get audio into the MPC plugin for the purposes of sampling. Back in the MPC hardware, press Shift and select Sample Record to enter the sampling mode. By default, the input is set to external, the mode is set to stereo, and monitor is set to off. We're recording from a bass plugged into the right input, and so we're going to choose right here instead of stereo. We're going to set monitor to on so we can look at our levels. Okay, so it looks like we're good to go. Another question a lot of people have asked is, how do I use the MPC plugin as a multiple out plugin in Ableton? When you have an MPC plugin on any track in Ableton, other audio tracks in Ableton can be set to listen to all these multiple outputs coming from the MPC plugin. So to route audio to those outputs in the MPC plugin, you can do that here from the track mixer. So on the track mixer, we've got our bass track, which is track 3 here, going to out 3 and 4. In Ableton, we have a track whose input is set to the MPC, specifically to out 3 and 4. And so that means we have only the bass coming in here on the MPC bass track. And that's all you got to do.